4,
And Mary's what?
5, 6.
That's enough.
So we have a quorum. Okay, I'm going to open the meeting of the CPC on Thursday, May 12th, 2022. This is the call to order. Welcome guests. Any public comment in the room or online? Hearing none, we're going to go to approval of CPC minutes.
You have to do the recording
Oh,
and take
just-
notification.
Go ahead, Jan. Notification, recording?
You're gonna say what you need to say, and then I'm gonna tell you something.
Okay. Recording and taping notification, as required by the law of the town,
Bylaw.
as required by law, the town may audio or video record this meeting. Any person intended to do otherwise, i.e. record or videotape, please acknowledge that to the chair. Takes care of that.
Okay.
I can't barely read this thing. Okay, welcome guest. So we're gonna go approval of the minutes. And we'll start with April, or do you wanna do your
We didn't get the April 7th
No.
minutes.
April's postponed.
oh, you haven't got it? It's postponed. Here we go. All right, let's do yours then.
Okay. I would like to amend the minutes of February 3rd, 2022 that were approved at the March 10th, 2022 meeting.
Second,
Do you want me to say what the amendments
Yeah.
are?
go ahead.
The amendment would be to change the voting status under CH4 to read Kathy Green nay, and under CH5 to read Kathy Green nay and Dave Nixon nay.
So there's a second on the floor. Discussion. Let's go to a vote. All those in favor to rescind?
Aye.
So, are we all set, Jan?
Mhm.
All right. New business. Annual town meeting.
Who was there to the bitter end?
Bitter.
Mary's not here
Well,
yet.
midnight.
I wanted to thank Mary publicly for stepping up to the plate, and she did, it was very well done. And then Kathy, I know I told you that you didn't have to speak on town meeting floor.
But I did.
Thank you very much for the effort, I really appreciate it. So, that takes care of those two things. Anything from the board? Questions, comments? Young lady, you have the floor.
Thank you. It was suggested at a different meeting I was at that there be sort of a voter information, they want to get more information out to the voters so that we don't have the problems that we seem to have every year, like we had this year, about where CPC money comes from, how we're allowed to allocate it, and I'm wondering if we should put out a one-page descriptor before town meeting, or if, I don't know what to do. I mean, we can't make people think, but I'd love if anybody had a suggestion on how to avoid the same problem we have every year.
Keep my comments to myself. Kathy?
Okay, well, annually, we're requested to attend the voters information session, which I did in lieu of your absence. And they asked the same questions, which is how is it funded, et cetera, and we went through every single article. Okay, in addition, there's usually an article in the local paper, like a couple weeks before. That's the best we can do in terms of getting people to read anything.
Okay, Robert, go ahead.
No, John
John.
had his hand up first.
Well, wasn't that what the trifold that got composed a couple of years ago was for? And it's still there. That in future town meetings, we could easily print a bunch of those up and distribute them at the town meeting as people are coming in, A. B, I think we put the trifold up on the website as well. And I suggested before I disappeared for a couple of months that we get a QR code and just hand it to people. When they walk into the town meeting, they can scan the QR code and go directly to information on the town website about what CPC is. And those are like in addition to what Kathy did, which is going to voter information night. I don't know how well attended that is.
It's on Channel 18, is what I'm saying.
Right,
Tune
but
in.
I don't know,
You can tune in anytime.
right. The question is how many people
Right.
actually
Who
tune in
knows?
and get that information. And I think people probably don't think very hard about what's gonna happen at the town meeting until they get there. And so distributing information as people are going in so they have something to refer to. And if anybody on CPC needs to get up and talk about things, they can point to the information that has just been distributed to help. I mean, it doesn't solve the problem, but it's another way to move things along a little.
I like the suggestion. Carol?
Now, I think the town has moved from putting explanations in the warrant to a separate document. Is that correct? Or I'm not sure what they're.
No, the separate document was just the motions. It's like a motion book.
Right, but
Doesn't
with
really
the
explain.
explanations,
Not
there's no.
much, no.
Well, it seems to me, a lot of folks, we're looking for the information in the warrant. And I know in past years that there've been descriptions and explanations of every warrant article. Since the CPC articles, I believe, are all grouped together, could we insert, a couple of paragraphs into the warrant itself? Because that seems to be what people read, who are gonna, who are asking a lot of questions. They're looking for what's in the warrant. And maybe on top of the other great measures that have been noted, we could include, either a page at the beginning where there's a lot of explanation about how town meeting works or town issues work, or right before the articles in the warrant have a description that explains CPC and how it works.
Mary, I want to again publicly thank you for your effort on town meeting floor.
Not a problem. Happy to be there and do it. I guess, having missed the beginning of the meeting, I apologize. I really didn't think town meeting went poorly at all. I thought it was quite smooth. You should have a couple of questions every once in a while, and we were prepared to answer all of those questions. So, from my perspective, I think during my tenure, David, my observation has always been that you felt we took our votes, and then it was not up to CPC to lobby for the individual applications.
That's
It is
correct.
up to the applicant to lobby for the individual applications.
That's correct.
And there were very few questions that were really required a CPC kind of explanation. I was prepared to get up and follow Kathy as far as the why on the Penrose article, but also the only other real question that came up that I was standing in line to answer, and then people got off the topic, so I sat back down again, was whether was the question about spending anticipated revenues, which is what we have been doing since 2016, since my first round on the board. So that was the only question that was really more CPC related. Carol gave a fine answer. I had stood up, and then we got off, the questions got off topic, so it didn't really seem to be necessary to bring the topic back up again. So I sat back down, but I really thought the questions about the CPC articles were relatively straightforward, and some people are going to agree with the Penrose article or disagree for any number of reasons, but I thought it went smoothly. I was actually really pleased at how well the first night of town meeting went. So, I agree with all of the points that, we have the trifold and we have the QR code, but most people aren't going to go and look at the application while they're sitting there at town meeting. So, the hope is always that people do their research before they show up.
Carol,
No, I already said my comment.
Kathy?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if you watch the trajectory of the meeting over 2 nights, the majority of the comments, whether it was CPC or not, okay, are very often from people who have no information whatsoever. So they've not taken advantage of any literature that was available before or at
During.
point of meeting. They have not attended any meetings like conservation, when there was a big issue, people saying, why didn't I know this was happening? People don't inform themselves. There's nothing we can do about that, and we can just continue to give them the information, but we can't make them, understand it or take the time to, really inform themselves. But they, so we have to be prepared on the evening of to answer the questions. I mean, as you saw, when you say lobbying, the Harwich Conservation Trust takes the time to get their newsletter out
Absolutely.
before the meeting, and they emphasize the ones that have some
Absolutely.
attachment to. And they get the voters out, and they thoroughly understand it. And that was evident at the meeting,
Absolutely.
so.
Hold that thought. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I'm not talking so much about the articles themselves. I'm not talking about us lobbying pro or against an article. I'm just talking about like the sort of basics about where the money comes from, why we can spend it on this, but we can't spend it on that. The buckets, there was like all sorts of confusion over that. So I'm just talking really about like
Yeah.
one page of this is how the CPC gets its funding, this is how it allocates funding, like that.
So,
Robert?
wasn't the first year we did the trifold, didn't we hand them out at town meeting?
Yes, we did.
I think
Yes,
we
we
just
did.
have to do that every year.
Yeah, it depends on the year and how many people are handing things out.
Right.
Because
That was an
people
issue.
don't wanna take more than one, or if they don't even wanna take something.
I didn't want to take the 2
Yeah, exactly.
that I got. Honestly, I'll be honest, I didn't. I knew I had done my research, I knew what I was voting for and what I
Right.
wasn't voting for, so,
Right,
the running the gauntlet on the way in
I know.
wasn't gonna
That's
help
what
anybody.
it's like.
So,
Okay, anybody else from the board? All right, on Monday night's Board of Selectmen meeting, I actually had a chat today with the chairman of the select board. On Monday night's meeting, one of the select persons said that town meeting went well, but she was hoping more information about CPC could be developed in some type of way and expanded on in the media some way, shape, or form. And I told the chairman that I don't disagree with that. The CPC board, and I took the luxury of including all of you, I think would be more than happy to help out in any way they could to inform the general public what CPC is. My frustration is, how many years have we been doing this now? For the past 5 years, since I've sat in this chair, people at this board have made proposals to put information out there to the general public, and it's still not received. If there's another mechanism that the Board of Selectmen can make recommendations to, or any of the board members can make recommendations to, I think this board would be more than happy to do it, whatever those recommendations would be. And it's funny that we talk about the little brochure. If you walk down the stairs in front of the administrator's office, there's a stack of them that big. And I know down in Howardsport, there's a stack of them. So I don't know what else, Carol, I'm sorry, I'm venting.
No, I think Mary was before me, though.
my only comment was gonna be, to Kathy's point, we have done all these things, and I think one of the great things that we've done in addition is John's put all the applications on the website. When, years ago, when we looked at, when we each took the different
was
towns,
huge.
it was one of the items that I liked about the Dennis CPC. They had all of the list of all of the articles that were filed and all of the lists that were approved year by year. And I think it's fantastic that John's been able to take that on and put that on the website. So it's there for all to see. I don't know what the answer is, whether it's an email coming through our webpage for a news flash that says, you know, if you're interested in CPC, all of the articles are on the webpage. Please look and see, but, you know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink to some degree, and that's, I think, part of what we deal with.
Carol?
So, I mean, I think there's two education issues. There's, I think what Elizabeth was talking about is just the bare bones basics about what these pots of money are for and where they come from. And I think that could be handled, and because there were a lot of questions about that, and there seemed to be confusion about that on town meeting floor based on some of the comments. And I do believe that, you know, all of these efforts are great, but it's really connecting that information to the people who are making that vote on that night. And I think the best way to do that is in the warrant materials. So and that could be easily handled. The other piece about the content of the articles and what they're for and all of that, I think as has been stated, you know, that's really the applicant's responsibility, and maybe we need to reinforce that as part of our process or our communications with the applicants to remind them, we don't do that. That's really your role once it gets to town meeting. And that's where the connecting to the applications and all of that, you know, we'll have these tools available to you, but it's really their role. So maybe just thinking about those two different challenges.
Robert?
Yeah, you know, in the warrant, and even the one I think published, they have a glossary at the very beginning. And that's where probably there should be a thing about CPC and what it means and the terminology that, you know, future revenues or whatever, that should be explained out, at least in the beginning of the warrant. Again, nobody would maybe not read it, but it'd be there.
I think
Yeah, you're right, it's all here.
Yeah.
the simplest way to think of anticipated revenues is it's no different than all the tax dollars that we spend and say are available July 1st.
Yeah, I remember when I
It's
first.
the July 1st money.
I know,
Oh,
but
we
I
had
remember
that.
the first
That's
right.
year I was on here, my head was spinning.
I understand. It's no different. You
Took
can,
Carol twice to explain.
you can allocate it ahead of time,
Yeah.
but once you're in the fiscal year, it's
Right.
allocated.
Right.
You can spend what has been allocated, but you can't
Mm-hmm.
then assign any more. It's locked. So it's pretty simple, but it's a good suggestion. It's a good place to put it.
John?
Okay, rhetorical question. Where do people, particularly people who get passionate about issues in town, where do they go for their information? They go to social media. So, I mean, I'm not a social media maven. I don't spend time on social media, but I would venture to guess that some significant percentage of the people who spoke and were passionate about issues on the town meeting floor, I would venture to guess that some significant percentage of them actually spent a fair amount of time on social media. So it's a question, something we would consider. It's just like on Facebook, either have a Facebook page for CPC, which probably wouldn't attract that much attention, or just post links to the website at places where people go and spend time on Facebook, which I have a Facebook account, but I basically never use it. But, so I don't know where those places are, maybe some of you do, but we could think about doing that specifically for the next cycle.
You all set?
I'm done.
Mary?
So a web page is one thing, the problem is, or a Facebook page is one thing. The problem is the town, as a town committee, that all has to be saved and recorded as a public record for future records laws. So that's the problem with a Facebook page. And the problem with the social media pages is that if a quorum of us comment individually on a page, it becomes,
That's a meeting.
it's a meeting. It's a meeting in violation of the open meeting law because it's serial deliberation. So that's the problem with the social media piece that we are always hampered by.
And it doesn't even matter if a quorum comments on it. We had this at the assembly and
Yeah.
we're told very clearly, never tweet about or put on Facebook about anything that may ever come before the assembly.
Right, because it's considered serial deliberation.
Because it's considered, that's me
Outside of an open
discussing
meeting.
it outside the proper channels.
Go ahead, John.
Just a follow-up question. I understand what you're saying, But if one person goes and simply posts links, here's where you can go for information on how CPC works and for information about what this year's applications are. Is that
That's
violating?
probably fine, but the problem is then you get questions, and then you're expected to answer those questions, and then other people are gonna comment on those questions, and that's where you run, it's like
Yeah.
moss on a stone rolling down a hill, it just builds up on you.
The,
Elizabeth, go ahead.
the town will every now and then officially
Right.
post things. So we could ask the town to
Oh, okay.
every now and then, if, I don't know if they do it personally or if they have a bot that puts something out once a month or once a week, whatever. We could ask them every now and then to put something out, just pointing people to our, don't forget, for information on the CPC, go to this link. We could certainly ask them to do it. But if one of us on the committee did it, we couldn't. If somebody's friend put it on, I don't think we'd get in trouble, but it's really not a good idea. Certainly, like, none of our spouses could do it, even. That's how picky they are. So I think we could certainly ask the town, in their, public relations efforts to every now and then remind people about us. Whether it's on the front page of their website, when you go to harwichmod.gov, every now and then they'll change something, Cranberry Festival, this, every now and then put a little reminder that this is where you get the CPC.
Okay, Mary,
Just a quick question, how many of the flyers are left?
Gee, not many.
there's a good 12 or 14, 15 downstairs right now,
Yeah, I distributed them before the town meeting,
right?
around town, library here, community
Library.
center, places around. And I held back just a smidgen, so
So it almost sounds
10,
like it,
15.
perhaps it's time to
Update.
update it, put new
John
numbers
and
on
I
it.
were gonna do that, and then we both got busy, but I'm still willing to work on that over the summer.
So
if
it
you
would be
want.
it would be a good time to update with newer projects and newer numbers,
Right.
certainly.
Robert, would you be able to jump into that? And
I'd help.
that's what I have to be careful of what Mary reminded me of as far as assignments. Is anybody else willing to jump? There we
Yeah,
go.
John and I,
Okay, so
We'll work on that.
that works. And John, would you be willing to?
Post.
Okay, all right.
Sure. Right now, I haven't looked at the website recently, probably there's some updating that can be done there, I will,
Is there a date that you folks could bring it back to us? I know it's,
I have to be honest, I mean, this COVID thing, surprised the hell out of me, and when I went into a deep dive, we are on a massive upswing, and I am terrified to make any plans with everyone this summer, because we have a real chance we're gonna have to go into a lockdown again. So I think, which in some ways might make working on this easier, because we can just pop on Zoom or make phone calls, but in other cases, it might.
Do you want to target July, and let's see if we
Yeah,
can do something
let's
by July
target
meeting?
July, I think.
okay, fair
Let's
enough.
try that.
Because I think realistically, you're thinking for something available in time for next year's
Yeah,
Right.
That's the point.
spring,
yeah.
it's not the fall town meeting, so.
right.
Okay, anybody else have anything to offer?
Didn't
On this-
Kathy didn't you do a total of all the CPC funds that have been spent and all of that? So those
That's
numbers.
online.
That's online.
it's been
Yeah,
posted,
so,
yeah.
All that information's there.
see, if they look.
Good question. Okay, next. Thank you all. Next, project managers. We'll start with Hines, Natural Resource Director. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. I was going to make a short comment about, you talked about people grabbing flyers and it's at their choice to read it. somewhat of an analogy is when people purchase a shellfish permit from me, most likely at the Natural Resources Department, I hand them copies of the regulations, and I ask them, and they're to sign that they've received a copy of those regulations. On their permit, a condensed version of those regulations are on their license on their chest. And I still will come across people on the flats doing something that isn't legal within the bylaws and regulations. It's a general warning, but the response is, I didn't know. Now, I've given it to them, they've signed that they've gotten it, it's on their chest. I've actually pulled their own license out in front of them in photo and said, look, right there, it says these are the days.
Right.
This is your limit, this is the size. You can't have somebody over 16. So I feel your pain there, but again, it's just a comment. Even when you have somebody possibly risking a fine, risking the revocation of their permit, you can only do so much in that kind of educational reaching out. And you're not the only board, or not the only department or anything that faces that within the town. So I just was going to make a comment along those lines.
You're on the hot seat now.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I appreciate being able to come this month. I was on vacation during the grand review of the projects. For those going back to when this article was given to Natural Resources and Conservation to do the Hinckley's Pond treatment and monitoring in a landside project, the numbers were initially broken down because they were estimates to do the work, and rough numbers at that time were $500,000 to treat the pond, $75,000 to do monitoring just before the treatment and after for a couple years. So 500 plus 75 is 575, plus 75,000 for a landside portion, because the town conservation felt that, yes, the pond's being treated, there isn't really that much public access, but in order for the pound to benefit from that, what could we also do? So there's some landside access to the pond, and it was my kind of presentation at the time. That's great, and I was in favor of all of that by kind of having those two projects, but anything that's done on the land would do absolutely nothing to remediate and improve the pond. So the treatment was one option to attack, and then the land side to access the pond would coincide. So the update, at least on the water side, is the treatment went really well. The monitoring has gone really well. I copied a summary from the most recent report of the results from that. That $500,000 for the treatment, that estimate, the job was done for $347,000, and the monitoring done was roughly done for about $50,000. So there is an amount of money that is no longer needed for treatment, no longer needed for monitoring. The initial treatment of the pond was done in such a way that the dosage was at the minimum amount based upon the phosphorus levels within the pond. There were a couple suggestions within the evaluation that we could do a little bit more than that. I didn't advocate for that for two reasons. One, why treat it with more than you really needed based upon the model? And two, it would just increase the cost. So we were able to keep the cost down, and the treatment worked out really well with the post-monitoring of the condition of the pond. So that's why there is an amount of money that is not needed at this time for additional monitoring or treatment of the pond. There was one thought that, well, after a couple of years, what's the condition of the pond? Is it going to need another small dose? We're not. It was a success, and we're good with that.
Are you willing to share that number with us?
I'm willing to share that with the landside portion if there's anything needed based upon the work that's going on, because it's taken a little bit longer, and I'll let Amy explain that, but I would not legally or use that. I don't need that for anything that was allocated for the treatment or the monitoring of the pond, and there's no more required in that section of that article. If that makes sense.
I think Dave wanted to know the exact number of what's the funds that are left.
$245,000, 186. It's in that report. And then there's still the full balance of the $75,000 for the land side that was estimated. Estimates are, within the ballpark of. So that's kind of the numbers that are there.
Now, as I remember correctly, they were two distinct projects.
Yep.
So the 245, 186 and change should come back to us. That project is complete. Go ahead, continue.
It's a pretty good summary of how that works out. I guess we can be open and frank. The idea is that the Hinckley's Pond project was the treatment of the pond, but the pond had, and be benefit for the town. Well, the benefit of the town is that public access. And I'd like Amy to speak, because I don't want to step on too much of that information and get something incorrect. But because of the time and the lack of engineering and the supply and, inflation over time, that landside portion, I don't know if it's gonna come in at 75. It's not gonna come in at 150, but what if it comes in at 80, 5,000 more than was allocated? There's that 245 that was in that grand project, that's outside my scope, but that's kind of my summary at this point. But you summarized it on the nose.
Okay.
Thank
Amy,
you.
would you please identify yourself? And
Sure, I'm Amy Usowski, Conservation Administrator for the town. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm happy to speak about the landside portion of this project. So as a way to essentially assist the project of the remediation of the pond passing, so we usually should improve access to the pond, because Hinckley really doesn't have public access. So right across from Pleasant Lake Pizza Shark, we have a little area that is joint town and state DCR land. And that area, we've decided was approved to create a little park with an actual access stairway down instead of people stumbling down the very steep hill. So that the landside project composed of improving that access there. Due to numerous turnovers kind of in the procurement area, it kind of took a while to get this going. We finally, I'm happy to say, been able to secure an engineering firm to do a site plan. A contract has been signed with John O'Reilly. They told me a few weeks ago it should start in a few weeks, so that should start. I will contact them and make sure that they're still on track. Survey would be completed this spring, provided to the state for comment, because it is partially on state property. The staircase, no, but the property itself, yes. And then go in front of the selectmen and conservation. Selectmen own the property. Conservation obviously has jurisdiction because it's right next to the pond. Had a site visit with potential tree contractors, because there are 14 invasive, dead, and/or hazardous trees there that we would like to remove. There's a really big canopy, so the removal of these trees isn't gonna have much of an impact. So we've gotten the quotes, and we've selected a tree company. That quote came in at just under $5,000 using prevailing wage. So that's actually a very good price for removal of 14 trees.
yeah, I guess it is.
Yep. So we're hoping for that work to be done late this spring and summer, and that person has said they could. We just haven't signed the contract yet. We should be doing that in the next few days. So if anybody needs a copy of my narrative, which I gave a couple months ago, I'm happy to pass it out. But I'm kind of reading through it. So, I mean, cost of labor and materials has gone way up since 2018, when this originally got permitted. I mean, I'm enthusiastic by the fact that engineering is less than 10, and the trees cost came way down from what I thought it would be. So I'm optimistic that we can stay at 75, specifically if the town were to, say, remove the asphalt there and do some of the preliminary work, but I'm not positive it will. And until we get through permitting, it's a little hard to kind of go out and see what the big cost is gonna be the bike pavilion and the staircase going down. It's not a simple staircase, not a simple grade to get down. So I'm hoping for one switchback. That's it. So that being said, I'm hopeful for 70, that we stay at the 75, but there is a chance it could be a little bit higher. Like Heinz said, I don't envision it being 150,000, but somewhere between 75 and 100 potentially. If you have any questions about the land side portion, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, we'll go around the board. We'll start with Elizabeth.
No question, sounds good.
John?
No questions, I'm all set, sounds good.
Robert?
Would it be possible, if the price does come higher, that you could do at least the stairway and hold off the pavilion for next year's.
Yes.
Thing?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're right, that'd probably be the most expensive, and the stairway should fall within your budget very comfortably, I would think.
Yes, we can certainly segment it if we need to.
Also,
Mhm.
Mary?
I guess that was gonna be my question as well. I'm just not sure, without an opinion of council, whether we can take from one side to the other. You know, if town council said it was okay in the way it was voted, then I guess I would be okay with it, but it would have to be somebody would have to give us an opinion to say that we could borrow from one side to the other.
Well, it doesn't prohibit Amy from coming to us
Absolutely
with
not.
a new application next year.
Absolutely not, and
And
that
it solves
was,
the problem.
It's fine.
and that was my question, exact question that Bob had raised. You know, could you split it in two and then put in a new application for one half of it for next year, so. Because I'm supportive of the public access, obviously.
How's the article written?
Hold on. We'll go around again. All set, Mary?
I'm all set, thank you.
Carol?
No, that's fine. It seems like there's a strategy here that allows you to move forward, and if you need more funds, either find out if we can make that switch or come back with a second application, so, sounds good. Thank you, Amy.
I'm so sorry.
Kathy?
Take my mask off for this. This is really disappointing, and I'll tell you why. I mean, the 2 times before 2018, the Hinckley's Pond remediation project came before this committee. I'm not sure how many people on this committee were here then, but one of the biggest things was public access. And it was turned down by this committee 2 years, and then the 3rd year, we really fought for the public access part, and that was really important. Now, if we had known that the remediation wasn't gonna cost as much, we would have probably maybe put some more money into the land improvement part and less money into the remediation part. But I don't believe that we can, according to our bylaws and everything, take from one pot and put it in another. So I would say that we rescind the funds that are left in the Hinckley's Pond remediation part, and for the other part, we do with less. We don't do with the bike kiosk, or whatever else. Unfortunately, public access is the most important part.
Yeah. I hear that, and I would comment that the way it was written was $650,000 allocated to the treatment, monitoring, and the land access for that project. That's how it was written. How it was estimated underneath was within the management of the project, and that were the kind of working with Chris Clark and the initial estimates.
No, it was, we voted
That
this
got-
committee.
You voted, yeah,
I,
but that's how we came up with the
There's a
numbers,
term I
yeah.
could use, but I can't use it, in a public venue. But what Kathy explained is exactly the way it went. It should have gone. Now, I don't know what you saw, I have to go back and look at the
Yeah.
actual application. It may have been tweaked by council or administration.
I don't know.
But as I remember, that's exactly, the way Kathy presented it, is exactly what we voted. So I'm uncomfortable going back into that, just so the whole board knows, going back and using any part of that 245, because I truly believe it was a separate project.
That's fine.
So, Mary, go ahead.
That's fine.
That's
So
fine.
I understand what you're saying. The question that would turn it for me, and based on an opinion, would be what bucket we took it from, because obviously recreation versus open space and resource preservation are two different buckets. So
Right.
that's part of the reason why I'm saying what funds we actually voted to recommend that they come from could also be determinative on whether we could or couldn't. But I do hear your point. I seem to recall it being 2 separate votes, but I don't remember it exactly because it was that long ago. So it was probably my 3rd year on the board.
So we can go back into the minutes and we'll
That's fine.
examine it
Yeah.
internally.
That's okay.
But in the meantime, the option for you is still there. Do what
Yeah,
you
we're
need to
moving
do to
forward.
get from A to B, and then if you need more funding, you can always come back to the board
Requesting.
and request it. So,
Great.
okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the board? Hearing none, we'll move on. You a board member?
I have a problem.
Go ahead, Jan.
I need digital, and I need hard copies.
Of what?
Your report.
I sent
nope.
a
You don't have to
digital
explain to
one
me, I'm
to
just saying.
Jan, and I put 10 hard copies in the box.
When? I mean, could I go down and get them? I mean,
Yeah, they were there either yesterday morning or this.
Oh, geez, I haven't been in, so,
So they're down there, and digital copies were sent to Jan.
okay.
that's
No?
true.
Oh, to your email.
No. Could you possibly
Okay, I'll
resend
check.
those?
Yeah, I'll double check.
Because we delayed from last month, so I didn't receive anything for the last month's meeting. And I just assumed I would get it for this, and I didn't. So Mom's being naggy, and I want my reports.
Well, I will
He's
tomorrow
bewildered,
send
so he
those
did-
digital, and the hard copies are
It
there.
didn't go through, you sent it, it didn't go through.
Or-
And Amy, do I have hard copies?
I will give them to you.
Thank you. I'm a happy camper.
Okay. All right,
I get to say.
thank you. Heinz? Amy, you have the floor.
So do you want to move on to the Red River?
We'll move on to the Red River.
So this article was from 2019 for a stabilization project. It was $100,000. This project, we need to relook at. I'm actually would like to give you back 80,000 of that until the time we are ready. Because at the time, we were hopeful. We had some engineering done. It got held up at the state because it is a hard solution where there's not a pre-78 dwelling. So Wetlands Protection Act, that's law. Though we've seen things pass state muster before. So what we have done in the time frame, and we've sent the emergency order last year into the state, was a temporary solution, essentially of just some stones. They're loose. They're actually not Jersey barriers, but similar. And that has helped stave off some of the erosion there. We've been able to keep some planting. If we could just keep the people off, they keep ripping down my fence. The problem is that we kept dumping sand over there as a soft solution, and it actually really contributed to the siltation in of that mouth of that river. So that's not the right answer to do either. So basically, we need a new survey at this point. So my request is that you allow us to retain $20,000 of the 100, and the 20,000 would go towards engineering, design, and permitting and meetings for the consultant, and that you take back the rest of the funds. When and if this project is ready for implementation, I will come back to you or seek grants for the construction funds. So I'd like to keep money for the initial legwork of the project.
Okay. Open this up to the board. Carol?
Is 20,000 enough to do everything you just said?
I think so. Do you want to make it 25?
Well, I just, I'm thinking of the jackknife project that we're dealing, just, the prices are high, and that sounds like a lot of work. I just want to make
It's
sure.
a very small area. So actually the length of the solution that we were looking at was only 60 feet long.
Mhm.
So when you look at, and we already have preliminary survey done of resource areas, so we have some of the original work done. And actually in town, we could do, if we needed to, we could do some of the permitting in-house. So I am comfortable that 20,000 will cover us.
All set?
Yep, all set.
Kathy?
Was a survey part of the original 100,000? Was that gonna include
It was
that?
not. That
So
was.
this is different.
The town had an engineer and survey back when it was done. So I don't have the wording of the article here for me.
And I don't have it either, but.
I mean, I could go
if
get it.
But if it wasn't part of the original article that we voted, then we can't do that. We just had this discussion.
Interesting. Mary?
I'm not so sure on this one, only because this was all about she was still going through permitting, so it was about getting an end project, if I remember this one correctly. It was about getting the end project of doing the revetment to stabilize the parking lot and to help the siltation at the mouth of the river. So I'm not sure.
Yeah,
If it was for the project in general and you were gonna do some of the work in-house, I think that's all contemplated in part of it. So this one's a little bit different for me
But it
because it's the
sounds
same
like-
project.
Go ahead,
It
Kath.
sounds like, we're gonna spend 20,000 for this engineering survey, studies, whatever. And then we're gonna, perhaps, depending upon whether you pursue grants or not, could be looking at another 100 plus for the actual construction of the project.
Back when we originally got quotes for the project, the quote for the work, and that was as presented, which may have changed now, we may have to do slightly more soft solutions. The quote for the work then was mid-60s.
Right,
Um,
I remember that.
Yeah, so we really kind of overshot because we, at the time, knew prices were going up, so. I'm more, I do have I can quickly go look, on my computer if that's helpful. Or I'm happy to get you that information, after this meeting about how the money, or how the article was worded. I should have brought that, I'm sorry.
That's all right. You all set?
Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I mean, depending, if the article is worded, we're giving $100,000 for this project, and we can do this, then I think we should. I think that's, we need the survey, and it would be good to do it now, because things are only gonna get more expensive, and the shoreline's only gonna change more and more.
Yeah, and that's why we need the new survey, is because since that time, when we had the original survey done, which I think was back in 2016, it's changed.
Yes, it has changed.
You
John.
notice what the article is? I had
2019 Article
45.
19?
Yep.
Give me one sec.
All right, in the meantime, go ahead, John.
I would wanna see.
Yeah, so I can confirm, because I live right up the street from Red River Beach and walk on that beach all the time, it has changed dramatically in just the last couple of years. Part of, as Amy said, due to the sand that the town had been using as a soft solution prior to this application. And I'd just like to say, I don't have any questions for Amy, but I'd just like to say that I agree
This
with
isn't
what
the
Elizabeth
minutes,
said,
but this isn't the
that-
minutes.
that
Be the problem.
it would be a shame to get hung up right now. I hope we don't have to get hung up with not being able to fund this engineering part, because things will change, and the erosion is a real issue there that is threatening town property, and something needs to be done about it, and I think we should try to address it with dispatch here. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Robert?
Again, I think it should be addressed, but it really does depend upon if we can do that.
So at this point, we're hamstrung with an answer for you?
It's okay,
But
I
we
can
can-
come back.
Yeah, I mean, we can go through and look at, see what we got. Mary,
I just think we need the
the actual,
minutes of the article from the town clerk's office,
I think
because
we
that'll
need
be
the
the,
application.
and you probably
can
need
get
that
you
too,
the
but your minutes from the article, exactly how it was voted,
Mhm.
as opposed to the warrant. Jan had the warrant up, and I agree with her, that's the warrant, but, it's how it was recorded after the meeting, I think is
You mean what
important
the
as
vote
well.
was?
yeah. Jim, would you be willing to take some time and dig that information out?
So there, all you have to do is call the town clerk's office, and they'll,
Well, no, I have the minutes right here.
from
Do you have a moment?
what minutes?
No, I think we need to read the application.
These are the minutes from the
But it's the
January
vote.
2018, and
But it's what's in the application.
So we
Okay.
change our vote to,
So we're talking
do
two
you
different,
vote?
I'm talking two different minutes. I'm talking the minutes of town meeting, the article as
yeah.
voted that the town clerk has
Right.
recorded, as opposed to our meeting minutes. I think our
Right.
meeting minutes are important as well, but the article, the way it was voted at town meeting
is the way it should.
is also important, because that's how town meeting voted it.
Do you have access to that right now?
No,
No,
not quickly. So, I
Okay,
mean, I
all
have
right.
access to my application,
okay,
but in terms of access to, it would take me a little bit. So, I mean, I would request that that I come back next month for that for you,
okay, fair enough.
okay?
Anything else from the board about this particular subject? Moving on. All right. Article 31?
This one was a little easier because no engineering or anything was required. This is Article 31 from 2020, the restoration and rehabilitation of town-owned conservation lands. You were gracious to give us $20,000 to use. I'm pleased to report we're making really good headway with it. We've improved signage on our conservation lands. We also have we were able to purchase some extra signage, so that way I'm not coming back to you in a couple of years asking for more signage. We purposely did that. So we've already installed the signs where we needed them most, and we have the others waiting to go. Post and rail fencing has been purchased, and about 300 feet of it has already been installed, thanks mostly to DPW. This was at Robbins Pond Conservation Area, if anybody was following that. The road, we kept the road open, but we closed off some of the accesses, the illegal accesses that people were taking to get down to the old bogs and the pond. And
Did what? I'm sorry, couldn't help
you can still
myself.
drive through. You can still walk. We left plenty of, you can park, you can walk. We wanted to keep it open for access, but
I understand.
I will tell you, we had a big cleanup day with AmeriCorps there. We pulled a couch out, couch cushions out of the water, pretty much a couch and chairs out of where the old pump station was for the pond, a barbecue grill, lots of lawn chairs, more glass and bottles and plastic than I can even say, and many cars worth of tires. It was a very good party area. So we want people to enjoy it, but we don't want people to mess it up. And I was very concerned that if a fire got going in there with how dense it is, that it was gonna be a real
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah.
So, we did put up a large amount of fencing, felled some trees also to dissuade people, using the trails like they shouldn't with their ATVs. Don't plan on making everybody get out, not be able to use it but we wanna curb the use of the illegal activities. So, that money helped greatly for that. We've used over $4,000 in fencing, and I just bought another 100-foot long of fencing for it. And it's not the plain split rail where people can easily take it out. It's pretty beefy.
Amy, would you consider doing game cameras up in that area?
I'm gonna get to that.
Okay, I'm sorry, I
You
apologize.
did not read her report.
Yeah, well,
So yes, but first, we purchased wildflower seed mix. If anybody's been down to the Bell's Neck Herring Run, the fish ladder lately, Conservation recently approved moving the parking area a little bit back from the run, getting rid of the hard pack that's there, and planting. So the first step we did in planting was we seeded the whole area with native wildflower seeds, and then this spring we're gonna go in and plant shrub plantings intermittently in between there to create more of a natural buffer between where you park your car and the actual herring run, while again, still allowing 3 points of access. Yep, so additional plants will be coming in the spring. Trail cameras are to be purchased and installed spring and summer of this year. We kind of been going back and forth about whether we want trail cameras that will send pictures, have a Wi-Fi plan and send pictures immediately to your phone. The only problem with that is we have a set amount of money right now, and it's an ongoing fee for those types of things. So I think we're gonna start, and we only need them sporadically too. I think we're gonna start with just your typical game cam with the card and have to go check it.
have a discussion with Eric.
Okay.
Um,
If a town already has a plan that we can add on to, I will definitely look.
Have a discussion with
Police
Eric.
or Eric Beebe?
Yes,
Okay, I will. So, hoping to do that this summer. And then we kind of want to see where we're at. We didn't need the money for the gates. There originally were going to be several $1,000s worth to purchase gates for Robbins Pond. We're not going in that direction at this point in time. We're going to see how this summer, because it's really worse in the summer, see how that summer goes with just the fencing that we've done and reevaluate. So I would anticipate the project end to be next spring. and hopefully turn back a little bit of funding to you.
Are you using large tree trunks,
For what?
barriers?
Some
Anywhere
are
along-
larger. I tried to just use trees that were already standing dead first, but, so where we put, there's two main areas where people were accessing with their ATVs, and one is by, if anybody's familiar, but the access off Birch Drive near Skipper Lee's Pleasant Lake Farm. They were going in there. We had put barricades up, but they just made new trails around them. So we dropped literally 15 trees because we're like, well, one tree is not gonna stop people, but maybe 15 will. So,
Anything to dissuade, yeah.
yeah, so we, they're smaller, but we're gonna see how it goes, and we put up fencing there. And then, again, 2/3 of the way down as you're heading west towards Northwest Gate. Actually, that's Northwest. I can't remember if that's East Gate Road or Northwest Gate. The through road, though, it's East Gate, right? So towards Northwest Gate, heading west, we put up some fencing there and felled several trees, too.
Now, unrelated, but chairman's privilege, anything on the run yet? The herring run?
What do you, in terms of?
Any counts? Too early?
Yep, we have had, so the Bell's Neck Herring Run, that Heinz manages that primarily with the state, but we're low. Everywhere is low this year. The primary months for herring run is April and May, tapering a little bit into June. We're more than halfway through the season, and we only had 205,000 as of yesterday.
Ooh.
After last year, that's surprising.
So last year, our total was about 600,000.
Yeah,
The year before that was 1.2 million.
right.
We were the biggest in the state 2 years ago. But all across the state, they're saying the numbers are drastically down. So there's still a chance we have a moon cycle coming up of having a lot of fish come up.
What's the reason? Water levels?
No, I mean, they're coming up, I don't think it's water levels. Even though we have a moratorium here, you go out to sea and you can catch them. So Heinz would, if you have more questions about that, he's much better suited to ask that than I am. But if you go to the herring run, right on, there's a counter
Right,
and there's a
right.
whiteboard, and we update it every couple days with how many fish have gone through. And on a fun note, the Boston IMAX Museum has contacted us to feature our herring run in their Boston Museum of Science film.
Oh,
Outstanding.
yay!
Outstanding.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Great.
So disappointing to hear those numbers are so low after,
Yeah.
I mean, it declined last year, but I remember how excited he was with the 1 point.
That was an anomaly. That really was. It was great, but that was way higher than we thought.
Wasn't that right when they stopped the draggers?
I don't know.
I think they had pushed the draggers out further into
Sure.
Yeah.
the ocean.
Okay,
So
as
those
far
are-
as this particular article, is there any question from the board for Amy?
I-
Well, Elizabeth?
No, I mean, my only question is, you could do all that with 20,000?
We pride, John's on our board and works with us quite often. We say we do a lot with a little, and we try to do as much in-house as we possibly can. So, I mean, we may budget for that, but
Impressive.
we're
It's a
trying.
hard-working department.
Very
Yeah.
impressive.
Absolutely. Anybody else from the board? Thank you very much for your
Thank you, I'll give these to
presentations.
yours. You don't need me anymore this evening?
No, I just want
'Cause-
those, if I
Yeah.
may. And just so I'm clear, so every time you said to check the
Minutes,
paperwork,
Town meeting.
town meeting.
you were referring to what was approved at town meeting, not what the warrant said, not what the committee said. when we
I think
voted
both.
it.
Every single thing we need to check.
So 3 different things.
I will get you the application, that's my end, okay?
Okay, that works. Would you get it to Jan, please?
I will get it to Jan.
All
So
right.
to Ca-
Amy.
Can I say to Kathy's point, I agree with her, I think it's the application, it's what we voted at our meeting, and then it's what town meeting voted on the
Correct.
article.
Yes.
And I think all of that will inform us better, and
Okay,
That's all.
I'm happy to come back next month or whenever you want me,
all right.
okay?
Thanks.
Thank you. Well done.
thanks, Amy.
Right now,
Isn't that in
on
the
my
town
screen,
report?
it is.
Yeah.
So right now, on my screen, I have what we voted on and what the warrant said.
All right. I'm gonna agenda this, so we won't go into it tonight.
And so we've got 2 report handouts for everybody. So there's 4 for y'all. And anybody who doesn't want their hard copies, just give them back to me.
I already have it. Do you need a paper copy? That's the same report.
Oh, yeah,
Because
I have.
Oh, this one's
I didn't do
different.
my
This is the thing that he hadn't gotten a digital copy.
Oh, I see, okay. Yeah,
I-
I need this. I
If you're getting a digital copy, you're gonna send it to all of us, right, Jim?
Yes,
So I don't,
anything you, any paper copies nobody wants, I'll take.
I have enough
I
paper.
like
I
paper.
like the paper.
I know, I do.
I like paper, but
I
I
have to
and
put
what
them
do you
in the
do with
minutes.
all that paper after,
I
how many
sit
years?
in
I
the
recycle
middle.
them.
Exactly.
And you know, I wanna tell you something, I don't even know how to open up one of those QRC or VRC, whatever those code things are.
You take your
Actually,
phone and you
it's
take
really
your camera and you
I can't
angle
do
it at
I
it,
can't do it.
and then your phone recognizes it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hopefully you can
but-
do
download it,
anything.
but-
yeah.
I'm not talking about you anyway, Ken. You already get all the information. It's like,
Okay, so,
it's the young'uns, it's the young'uns, you have to give them a QR
Youngins
code.
don't vote. It's the old people that vote.
If the young'uns don't
Okay.
Oh,
vote,
God.
you gotta do something about it.
Oh, okay, all right,
Sorry.
that's
I was a
okay.
youngin' and I did, way back in the day.
All right, next. Discussion on the 22 HC6 adult share housing project. So, I'm gonna let you handle that particular discussion. You can open.
Okay, so, after the April meeting, where, Mr. Locatore came during the public part of the session and just spoke to us about his updated application, I was concerned that, he was walking away not understanding why he couldn't continue the discussion, and that perhaps there was still a lot of unanswered questions. So I spoke to David, and we agreed that I would call him personally and have a conversation with him, because I wanted to make sure we were all on the same page, especially going into town meeting. I didn't want there to be any surprises. So I did speak with Jeff on the phone for 50 minutes. We had a delightful conversation. He was very happy that I did call him. I explained why he couldn't talk at that particular meeting. We talked about the process, we talked about the application, we talked about him coming back in for the next funding cycle, and now that he's armed with more information. We talked about the questions that we've submitted to him that need to be answered. We talked about the fact that he doesn't need to wait until October to come, that he can come to us in July, and it would give us an opportunity to, have some, back and forth, but I did stress to him the importance of having answers to those questions. And he was very grateful for, that information and the time. So,
Okay, open it up to the board. Mary?
I just wanna say thank you for that, because
Yeah.
I left that meeting very concerned as well, that he just didn't have a sense of
Yeah.
what the cycle was, and that he would need to come back again, so thank you for doing that, Kathy.
it was good, it was a good conversation,
Good.
yeah.
Carol?
I'm all set, thank you.
Robert? John?
No.
Elizabeth?
Thank you.
Okay,
Can I just say,
again, go ahead, Carol.
again, just reflecting on town meeting the other night and sort of affordable housing in general and stuff. I mean, I just, or community housing. I was just thinking the other day about, I'm not sure what town meeting response will be to funding such an amount for a small number of individuals. I'm all for, various forms of housing being created in town. In fact, if you look back into some of our past funding, we did some buy-down programs where we did $75,000 for a couple different houses. I think they were called the American Dream Act or something like that. We've done some combination of things. But I mean, just given the climate, I'm just not really sure. So I think we just need to keep that in mind, because we don't want to foster something and try to push it forward if we really, I think we just need to just keep that in the back of our minds, that's all.
That's an interesting. I'm an advocate of the applications, the applicants standing before the taxpayers and asking and putting their information to the taxpayers, the reason they're asking for the money. In previous boards, the CPC used to promote whatever the applicants were. I changed that. In this particular case, I'm almost sorry I did. Because in this particular case, if there was some way to paint the picture for the audience that the CPC could do it might make a big difference on town meeting floor. But that's one person's thoughts. Mary?
So, to follow up on Kathy's point, you know, I think when you look at buy-down programs, you know, it was a different real estate climate too. So what's a reasonable buy-down program now, you know, you're talking $600,000-$700,000 average
I know.
3-bedroom homes. So your buy-down program is now, instead of looking at 75, you're probably looking at 150 to 200 to make it affordable. So to your point, yes, I think when applications come in, that's how do you get the most bang for your buck out of your community housing bucket. So I think we'll end up having lots of conversations about that. And, you know, David, from my perspective, I don't think it's a bad thing that we're not lobbying. I think we speak with our feet, and when we vote on this board as to what we support and what we don't support, individually and collectively, and that should speak for itself for town meeting floor. And there is benefit to the applicants needing to do the sales pitch. You know, I mean, and a good example is
I understand.
and a good example is
It's
how good a job Michael Locke does when he's advocating for his articles. So, you know, an applicant really should be able to get the townspeople on board for spending the tax dollars. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing.
John?
Yeah, just a question. When I last looked at the proposal, one of my conclusions was it was very dependent on being able to use a specific piece of town land, and I don't know whether that's still the case.
Yeah, that is,
And
In a nutshell.
and it wasn't clear to me at the time that was even buildable.
Right.
Has that been clarified in any way?
Go ahead, Kathy.
the town is funding an engineering study to determine that. And then, once that's determined, if it could, you know, be permitted for a 4-bedroom home, then the next step would be to decide whether they would want to either try to donate it or sell it to the individuals. And that all has to take place before it even comes
Right.
before us again, and
Yeah.
they know that. You know, so, you know, another thing I talked to him specifically about was his proposed budget. And, like, he has an attached budget that says, you know, plumbing, 15,000, electrical, 0. And so I said to him, so what does that mean? And so what that means is that the electrical has all been promised to be done as in-kind services. So I told him that he needed to get specific letters of support from these organizations or companies that they would do that. I said, they don't have to, you know, put it to the exact amount, but they have to say up to, you know, $30,000 or not to exceed, you know, whatever. I said, we need to know that, you know, you have this. And he's also found out that he's gonna have to take out a mortgage individually, at least this is what he told me, versus the nonprofit taking out a mortgage, which is gonna put extra layers of difficulty into this whole thing. So, you know, I think it remains to be seen what's gonna happen.
Robert?
And that brings up a point, is my concern is that their organization and their charter, we have to make sure that it is something we can fund. That's I've always been concerned about that.
wasn't that one of the legal questions that
That-
went this year?
Yeah,
So they're due, they owe us an answer on that,
yes,
correct?
they do, yeah.
Who's they?
Town council.
Town council or legal
Thank you.
council, legal council.
See, the more we talk about it, the more I understand that this comes under the realm of the trust. That's what the trust is in place for.
Yeah.
Carol, thanks for doing the work on this too.
Sure. I think one of the key issues had to do with the deed restriction as well, and whether that was a part of it, because that speaks to your point, Bob, about whether this can be funded. And I just think in terms of for any number of housing proposals that come before us, we'll have our input, but, I think, having a sense from the Housing Committee, from the Housing Trust, from the Housing Authority, not just, sure, we support all housing, but just how does this fit into a strategy or a game plan to address the community's needs, and trying to elicit that.
Absolutely.
Or lack of.
I even pointed out that his application, the second application we received, which we got that night, I pointed out that there were some mistakes on it. And for one, his partner's name was still listed as a co-applicant and he has dropped out. Number two, when they listed the property in the description, they listed a 1/4 acre property, and I said, you'd never be able to build a 4-bedroom home on a 1/4 acre property. I said, so you really need to go back and
Redo.
revisit everything and make sure everything is correct. So that's, that's why it was a very fruitful conversation.
Elizabeth,
To me, it's all hypothetical, and it would be lovely to see something like that succeed, but we're so far from that happening. And I do, as it stands now, I think it is better for the Affordable Housing Trust to use their money for it, because if it's got a personal, I can't see how, if the mortgage is in a person's name, that we could do that.
that's a whole different.
That's all different, those are all details that the
Right.
trust, I really think, needs to work hand in hand with these individuals and sort out before it even comes to us for funding.
But I
That's-
also think it could be the fact that it's a new nonprofit that doesn't have a financial history, and the bank really wants a guarantor on a mortgage as well. So there are any number of things that could mean.
Oh, yeah,
So,
there's no question about that.
So that's, to your point,
No
it's all
question.
stuff that has to happen. And it sounded like they were working with the trust on different parcels of land, so hopefully that all gets sorted out before it comes back.
But we did give the trust $500,000 this year.
We
so
did. Absolutely.
I think that would be a nice
One of the many
use.
things that they could use it on, right?
Anything else from the board? Does the board want to take any action on this?
I don't think there's any action to take.
Yeah. I think it was lovely that Kathy called, and I think
Absolutely.
that was great, and now, we've done what we can,
Well, we
thanks
can.
to Kathy.
I still don't believe that, but I'll go with the board. All right, next, vote to return CPC projects open balances.
Make a motion to rescind $245,186 from the 2018 Article 57 Hinkley's Pond Remediation and Public Access Project.
There's a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Second,
Discussion.
Yes, Kathy, just repeat that number one more time. 245-186.
245-186.
Six.
Thank you.
We'll start with John.
I don't have any comments, thank you.
Okay. Mary?
I personally think it's worth asking the question whether how it was voted before we make the rescission vote, but it's one person's opinion.
Elizabeth?
yeah, I think that one could wait a little. We have the other ones,
Well, there's a motion on the floor, so it's been seconded.
but isn't that just for discussion?
Yep. So,
Yeah, so I'm,
Carol?
So just for my own understanding, so if we were to vote this, then there would be no potential to explore reallocating any of that money to the landside component.
That's correct.
And is there still an outstanding question that there may be the ability to do that? So I would support exploring that if there's an active way to do that, if that's, I wouldn't want it to just sit there, but I don't know if there's an action item on that.
Well, it depends on your vote. Robert?
Exact same thing. I thought we did leave it that we would at least explore the article, so I think it's premature to rescind it. So
Okay.
we'll give one last look.
Kathy?
Okay. No, I hear whatever you're saying.
All right, so I have to call for a vote.
Yeah.
So, all those in favor?
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Town council may tell us that we can't. And then we're just back at the same
When we
place
look
next
back
meeting.
to the Hinckley's vote, it'll be interesting to see who voted no on that. That would be me.
You're terrible.
I know I voted in favor of it.
Okay,
I had to think as you were saying, I'm like, wasn't me?
I know.
discussion of CPC funding percentages. I'm gonna, I don't know how you folks are gonna handle this. Anyway, the finance director has moved on. And I'm really concerned with the CPC financing, how it's gonna be perceived from the next director. So I asked the following questions. And I'm not gonna say who I asked it from. So we have 3% of the levy every year. And we know that runs around $1 million, $1.2 million, somewhere in that realm. Then we get interest from the monies that we don't use from year to year. That could run anywhere from $2,000 to $12,000. One year was significant. Then we have the money from the states. So the money from the state comes in two parcels. And we first get the first allocation, and they don't give us a percentage, they just say, this is how much the town is gonna get. Then they go into deliberation and they say, okay, we're gonna have a second portion, apportioned to each town that's in the CPC, whatever the legislature decides. The most recent document I've got from Stewart is that there's gonna be a 46% increase this coming year. So I don't know if the 46% increase is based on the total amount, because they don't know what the total amount is,
It's gotta be on the state allocation.
or yeah.
It's only on the state allocation.
But they keep changing it. So how do you lock into a percentage? And the other thing is, when you do the estimates for the following year, what formula is being
So-
used?
So if I may, the
ahead.
finance director, that's what we've always had Carol do, and Carol has always given us conservative estimates.
Well, what is that number?
So she knows essentially what the 3% on the tax receipts, right?
Correct.
So it's 3% on our tax bills.
Right,
So that's
that's a hard number, right?
That's a pretty easy number for her to estimate. And then she looks at the information from the state and she gives a conservative number, which is why, generally speaking, with one exception, we've always had, even though we have allocated anticipated revenues, right? We still have a balance in that account because she's estimated conservatively for us. So we haven't overspent anything.
Right.
Because the receipts coming in are generally exceeding what
Okay.
the actual revenues are.
Hold that thought. You're exactly right. The problem I'm having is we get a new finance director. I don't know what the percentages were that were used to do the conservative estimate. We have another finance director that comes in and says, well, those numbers are incorrect. We're gonna do it this way.
So the numbers are what the numbers are, right? You've got revenue. It's all revenue. So you're gonna have you know what the estimate is on your tax levy. it's an easy number.
I understand
And
that,
then
but what
it's
I'm saying
And
is,
the state allocation is such a small portion of what we're getting in funds that I think you're worrying about it for no reason. I mean, so where is it gonna, where is the impact for us? The impact for us is when we're spending anticipated revenues. Because what we're spending, the main balance that we get from a finance director every year, whether it's Carol or XYZ person, is a certified number that's certified during the annual tax certification. So we go through the process with the town. They're gonna take all of the revenues that we have now, what we haven't spent and have spent this fiscal year, and that's a hard number, right?
and I understand
So we're gonna have a
that.
hard number.
What I'm looking for is, there has to be a percentage. I'm not a CPA, but there has to be a percentage.
Right, but
What is that percentage?
But her
That's what I'm looking
percentage,
for.
her percentage on that small, so so what she's doing is taking what you think is gonna come in. So, your tax bills are gonna change based on, right, January is when they're based, right? So you get 3% of whatever that tax levy is. So that's what you know is gonna come in. That's a
So how
solid.
much of that 3%
that's a
am I
solid
holding
number-
back?
That's a solid number that's supposed to come in.
So how
right?
much of that, how much are we holding back?
None, because.
None.
You're
Because,
doing estimates based on that number.
so,
You're
on
doing
that
next
number,
year's estimates based on that number.
Plus some of
So
the-
what's the number we're holding
so
back?
plus some of the anticipated revenues, some of the anticipated revenues from the state for the other two funds that are coming in. So she's giving us generally speaking, you can see that we received, I don't know, 1.7 million in CPC funds every year. I mean, we had our 10% buckets this year, what did we put, 160? So 160
Yeah.
times 3, right? So that was 160 is 10%, so 1.6 million is what she's basing on, right? So, and we've gotten more every year, but I think that's a hard number. And the only place it impacts us is in our anticipated revenues, and I think that's gonna be less of a problem next year because we didn't overspend our undesignated fund this year. In years
No,
past.
money in the buckets, yeah, I
In years
understand.
past, we have spent to the penny and we didn't have money to fund Sand Pond or some other project.
We've spent to the penny in years past because we never did anticipated revenue.
No,
That only
always,
came in 16, 17?
16. But during my tenure, we spent down to the penny. It was 2 years ago or last year, I can't remember which.
2 years ago, we would
we-
have it out, yeah.
We had
Yeah.
to sit here and we were negotiating, we took less from one bucket. We didn't do the fencing at Brooks Park or the lighting at Brooks Park, and we didn't fund Sand Pond and the renovations there. So, because we didn't have enough money to fully fund the 16 or 18 articles that were before us. This year, we left money in the bucket, so that money is all gonna get certified this next time around. We're gonna know that we have it. And my only point for saying that is the more we know we have, the
The
less
better.
anticipated revenue we have to worry about. But that's the best I can describe it.
May I ask, what's the relevancy of this question
The rel-
to
or-
the,
to me,
to us?
All right, the
Because
relevancy,
isn't this the responsibility of our town treasurer,
Yes.
budget finance director to guide us and say, this is what it is?
that's interesting, she doesn't work for the CPC, she works for the town of Harwich.
Right, and it's the.
We are the town of Harwich.
Okay,
David.
so,
We are.
let me go back to the first year I was on this board. We had a new finance director. And that finance director had very little experience with CPC. And he moved, the town had an issue. He moved $850,000 of CPC into the general fund until it got caught. And it wasn't gonna be brought forward. And when it started to be brought forward, on camera, they backpedaled and took the money out, put it back into the CPC fund. So, I'm just thinking, what are the numbers? There's a percentage, and I would like to know what that percentage for estimate is.
But isn't that
Because
up
that-
to the individual person makes that estimate? Now, did you ask Carol what percentage she does in her conservative? Does she take 90% of what the state thinks you're gonna give us? Did you ask her?
We did,
And you didn't get an answer?
right?
So,
Okay.
I'm not trying to be coy. All
No,
I'm
no,
trying
no,
to
it's
do
not
is
coy, but
educate the board that we have to be vigilant with the new person, whoever that person is that comes in. And in the position we're in, we should know the number. That's our job. That's not the finance director's job. That's our job, because we're in charge of those buckets.
so David,
Go ahead.
CPC funds are CPC funds. They're dedicated funds. They're under a state law. That money needs to be where it needs to be. And we get audited every year. So whatever happened before hasn't been happening recently.
No, it hasn't, and it's funny you said that, because
So-
yes, there was state audits back then,
I'm,
and it got missed, so.
So I'm not disagreeing with you on that, but again, there's a pattern. If the revenues coming in are significantly different, or the balances are significantly different with the real estate market, unless there's a, something that
It's gonna go.
explains, unless there's something that explains a significant difference in the balance, there's gonna be a red flag for somebody. Whether that's you, whether that's whoever else, but I'd also have to trust that the town will do an excellent job in vetting the next finance director. Whether it's an interim, whether it's a permanent, whether it's a whatever. So,
Okay, so this is an informational for the board. John?
Question. Do you know, does anybody here know whether there's straightforward access to, and there's only two pieces of information at question here. One is, what is the state contribution here, the state extra money? What is that amount every year? And then what gets put into, has been put into Carol's budget every year? Can we access those two pieces of information? Because that access would answer your question, and
What I
I'm
can-
I'm imagining that it's different every year, for one thing.
so it is
I
different every
mean,
year.
not just the amount that comes from the state, but the, whatever,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
conservative twist that Carol has put on it in the past.
Right, based on status of what you think, like during COVID, I'm sure she gave us a much more conservative estimate than she might have on a non-COVID year, just because of the way receipts were happening too, so, but I also think, we've been in a good situation for the last significant number of years, and the revenue that comes in, it comes in like through cherry sheets from the state, and those deposits happen throughout the year at different times, and the treasurer collector then has to figure out what that money is and where it gets allocated. I mean, it could come in combined with short-term rental revenue, it could get combined with any number of other, it could come in with an election reimbursement. We get reimbursement from the state for unfunded mandates, for state elections. So those revenues come in throughout the year, and they all, at different times, and they all have to get allocated, figured out from DOR.
Maybe I should say this up front. I trusted the finance director of this town implicitly. She worked with Bob McCready, myself, Kathy Green, Mary Maslowski, into doing research, chasing down accounts that were years and years left unused, with money sitting in there. She did an outstanding job. So this isn't a reflection on the finance director. It's just a question I'm asking, because I don't know what's gonna happen in the future. And I want you to all be aware of some of the past and some of the things that have happened. So,
Can I say, I think it's safe to assume that she's left us in a good place,
I'm,
right? So
yes,
she's a forensic accountant who audited the accounts and figured it out.
Yes, she did.
And that's what was needed at the time, and I think you're in a better starting place than you were 20 years ago, and, you know, hopefully it all goes up.
Kathy.
Just a quick question. Aren't, isn't the state contribution tied to the Registry of Deeds somehow? And the income that we get there, that they get from that?
I think it could be.
I think it is, isn't it?
I think it is.
And because the last couple of years have been crazy with real
Right.
estate market, and that's been on the upswing.
Right.
That's why the state portions was, some of it was higher this year. I'm pretty sure.
I don't know if that's
That's not true.
necessarily the reason, because the updates I get from Stuart are,
Yeah,
the coalition consistently goes in front of the legislature,
true. But part of it.
asking for
But
more.
part of it
Part
is,
of it-
I don't know where the money, honestly, I don't know where
Part
the,
of it's tied to that,
I think you're right.
And I think,
I think,
you know,
I
not-
think you're right.
Not to, you mean just the state has a registry?
no.
'Cause
Whatever, like.
Some of it comes from the
county
registry
of
of deeds.
Barnstable, like, you
Right,
know,
that's what
registers
pays
X
for
number
the
of
county.
deeds. No, what?
The county gets its funding from the registry of deeds.
Well, I'm sure lots of places do, I'm just saying, I thought that it was somehow tied
So it's
to it, but I
3%
don't
on
know
our
for
real
sure.
estate taxes, and there could be a portion that comes from the
Yeah.
deed stamps, I'm not sure.
So,
okay. I don't know the answer to the question. So I'll say to you what I tell the Board of Selectmen every year when I stand in front of them. The numbers are fluid. So, moving on. Update in the written policies of the CPC application. Here we go. Carol, thank you for the effort.
Sure.
I mean, when I went through and I saw what you put into this, wow.
And Kathy's reviewed and added to this as well.
I didn't, okay, then you too.
I don't know what you
This
think,
is pretty
Carol. I
crude.
don't think you wanted, Carol wasn't doing it in a vacuum, okay, I mean.
Okay, I got it.
But I was no help. so.
Well, so essentially, just to refresh everyone, I think at a recent meeting, we were talking about a number of sort of policy issues around reporting, around people providing adequate information in their applications and providing information after the fact. And so I think there was interest in looking at the application materials and trying to be clear about what the expectations are for applicants. So Kathy shared the entire packet, and you know, as I went through it, because this is what I do a lot in my professional life, I did a lot of just sort of what I would consider, you know, tightening up and editing. In the first section, so the application has the two sections. The first section is about eligibility and really just helps people understand what the act is and how it works and what kinds of projects are and are not eligible for funding under the CPA. And so I don't know if you want to go through those edits. They're mostly just, you know, editorial in nature to try to organize not so much change the information, but change the order of it. We did update the table. Thanks to Kathy, she provided the updated table. There are just a couple of different tweaks there in section 1. So maybe I'll just ask if there's any reason why we want to go into those edits, which are more informational, not really policy at all.
Okay, to the board. John?
Well, I don't have any suggestions. I just thought that it was a lot of work, and it seemed to clarify and clean up a lot of things.
We have a lot of,
certainly
we
did.
have a lot of formatting issues, which I told Carol you would be able to take care of.
Okay, well, I'm fine with that because
I
I'm
mean,
just some kind
saying
of a,
that yeah.
I do that kind of thing because that's what I've done for a while.
We're content, you're formatting.
That's fine, but I didn't even look at the formatting because I was looking at the redlining version, and I can't tell what's
Well,
going on with the formatting.
Some of it was changing, like, a word for consistency, like the words eligible and allowable.
Yeah,
We
right.
felt that we should just have one word to be consistent. And then there were some paragraphs that there was a lot of redundancy, like the stuff was repeated a couple times, so we took it out. So, and then in terms of the formatting, like if you'll go down to, historic preservation, the chart is supposed to go ahead of community housing there, it's stuck in the wrong place. Okay,
So some of that will get fixed when you get rid of the red lines. So accepting the changes in the red lines should make it easier
I'm not
for you to
sure
move a
about-
chart.
I'm not sure about the chart, but I
Okay,
think John can move the chart for us.
Yep.
We do need to update the affordable housing low-income limits. Like, you got me the chart last year, Elizabeth, so we need to update that. A lot of it was just cleaning up some of the language. And then, I don't know,
Okay, hold on, you're really going at it. Let me deal with what's on the floor now. Robert?
So, I mean, just an overall comment, I like the way things are moved around because it flows so much better.
absolutely.
And that's what I really picked up on. I didn't notice any real changes in policy. I don't think I did. So, but other than that, I just thought it was just such a good cleanup. That's,
All set? Thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I had said I would help, and I was no help whatsoever. And I think Carol and Kathy did a wonderful job.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Mary?
I thought it looked excellent.
Okay. All right. Do you want to continue?
Sure.
I found there's some questions I have.
Yeah, I'll just highlight a couple of things, and
Go
maybe
ahead.
Kathy has a couple of others. In the application package part of it, section 2, so there's sort of like a little lead-in table of contents, and then under submission requirements. One of the things that we felt needed to be clarified is, additional information, because we had a deadline, but then we also had another deadline. And so we tried to make it clear in the language that, the expectation is that applications are complete, even to include any information from other committees that you may need. And if you don't have them because you can't get before them within the period of time before the application's due, you list that you need them, or you provide indication that you're scheduled on an agenda or will be seeking to, and that kind of thing can be provided by December 1st after the application is submitted. Or if you are requested by the committee to provide information, that is provided by December 1st. But December 1st isn't sort of the extra date for you to just add information. It's specifically for things that there's a good reason couldn't be provided. You don't have your audited financial statement back yet from your accountant, but you note on the application that is forthcoming, that kind of thing. So we tried to clarify that.
Before you go any further, I'd like to talk about that specifically. When I got to the opening page, and I read that, before there's discussion about the date, the initial date of October 3rd. And I've heard discussion from department managers department heads, that, well, that's not necessarily the date. The date is December 31st, to have all information that they need to require to put before us. So what I'm asking the board is there any way that we can highlight in some way, shape, or form that the information in the package should be mostly complete by the time they submit the packet? Because in years past, that's where the issue's been. We've allowed, for whatever reason, we've allowed placeholding, we've allowed a lot of things. And it gets extended and extended, and we run into problems with it. So,
if I may just say to
Go
that
ahead.
point, I think one of the things we added in here under section 3 application procedure, review procedure, is that, I think that's where it is, that the, the CPC will review the application material and make a decision if it's complete or not. And if it's not complete, it's not eligible for funding in that round. So I think it makes clear that that's a step that's gonna happen. And, if we receive a package that, they haven't filled out the form, or they haven't provided the information that's required, it's not just a matter of they didn't go before the Conservation Commission and they need to. It's extensive. The committee would make a determination, this package submitted by the deadline, but not complete, not eligible for funding, come back next year.
So Carol, how would you highlight that so it grabs their attention when they read the application?
They have to read the application.
Yeah.
David. I mean,
And then we would say,
we
well,
can't
it's
spoon-feed
very clearly
everything.
stated in the application.
I have a comment, Mr. Chairman. The way you highlight that is reject some applications on that page.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Just reject them if they don't conform, whether the person didn't read it, or they read it and thought, well,
They
I
don't
don't know
mean
what
it.
that really means, by the way, I'm just not gonna get it done by October 3rd, so I'll submit it when it's time. Well, I think we should just, if that happens, those applications should be rejected, and once that happens people will start to get the message. But maybe, I like the text that you put in there. I think it makes it very clear, and hopefully people will read that and take it seriously. But if they don't, we just have to enforce it. I don't know what else you can do.
Fair enough, Robert?
Now, on that point, if they identify that this isn't complete because I don't have this thing yet, that doesn't mean we're gonna reject it immediately, right?
Correct.
If they identify, if they just leave stuff blank and don't give an explanation, yeah, I can see rejecting it. But at least if they make an attempt saying, okay, I don't have the budget because of this, and I will have it by such a date, I think that should be, we should consider that as information is supplied, it's just not, it's not a reason for rejecting it at that date.
Okay, Elizabeth?
I think that maybe if we took the paragraph from section 3, where you go into detail about if it requires a sign-off by a town meeting, if you were to put that in the section before December 1st, and take out, I think any supplemental paperwork, supporting documents or evidence is way too broad, and that gives them an out to say, but really, we don't have to have this in until December 1st. So I think if we specify in the first paragraph that if you can't get signatures in time for October 1st, we understand that because of the committee structure, but, and then when people come in and say, give us the application on the 1st and say, the only problem is I wasn't able to get this budget part because of this, then we have the leeway to say, okay, but I think otherwise that people do just take it as December 1st as the deadline.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Mary?
So I think there's a difference between not having a complete application because you procrastinated or let the time expand to the time allotted versus just having things not be available. And I think if there's a reasonable explanation, I couldn't get before historic on a cemetery because they didn't have a quorum or we missed a meeting, but I'm scheduled for next month, is a lot different than saying, oh yeah, we haven't spoken to vendors yet, so we don't have a real estimate. We're still working on it because we just haven't gotten to it. There's a difference between procrastination and really just
Right.
having some missing pieces that just aren't timely.
Yeah,
It
and
could
that's,
be a procurement issue. It could be, the engineer didn't get back to us in order to be able to go out to bid yet, so this is what his base estimate was, but we're waiting for a final bid project. Different,
yeah.
different
So
things.
how do we make it clear that we accept, we understand there will be setbacks, we do not, but this is not, December 1st is not to be taken as an excuse for
So
procrastination.
personally speaking, I thought the language was excellent. The other thing to do is to just put an extra sentence in that says, the determination of whether an application is complete is at the sole discretion of the CPC, and that decision is final.
That's outstanding. That gets us where?
Yeah,
Kathy, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the statement about the supplemental materials is too nice. A little too nice. I mean, it needs to be a little firmer or kind of brought in a little bit to say that we're gonna deal with it on a case-by-case basis. Something like that.
And our decision's our decision.
Yeah.
If we decide it's not complete, it's not complete. So you're subject to the whim of the board, so kind of proceed at your own risk.
We take our chances. Robert?
Just to bring up the point that I think the only approval we ever need is from Historic Commission. I don't think there's any guidelines that say you need selectmen's or anything else.
That is true.
To me, those are just recommendations from those committees,
So-
You're right.
and, yeah.
I would say a town department needs at least administration
Oh.
or selectmen approval.
Yeah, we're not
If it's a
talking-
town department, do you know what I mean?
Right.
And that was made clear this past year.
Right.
Is because the town administrator submits them all,
Right.
no more
No.
individuals.
Just the chair of the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator are gonna have a discussion on that again.
Okay.
So, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes back to where it used to be, where the Board of Selectmen will be notified if something comes from the town by a department head. But it may be, I'm not sure yet, it may be that department head that brings that forward will be the project manager. So I will keep the board informed that discussions will be sometime next week, so.
So
Carol.
I'm noting two kind of themes here, under section 2, sort of reining in what can be submitted before December 1st. Right now, it says if any supplemental paperwork, supporting documents, or evidence of town committee reviews are not available, they should be listed as forthcoming on the application form. We could reduce the number of categories there and just say, if any supporting documents are not germane to the application are not available, they should be identified, and the reason for the delay identified on the application package, or something along those lines, if you want to expand on that. Or, this, I think, if we add other language about, it's really the committee's discretion to determine whether an application is complete or not, this gives us a little bit more latitude to, having a little broader there gives us a little more latitude to make that judgment if we are clear that it is the committee's judgment, and we could say, well, no, that's, that was not acceptable. But, so those are the two areas under 2 and 3 that I'm hearing you would like to see some modification.
if we just put in, the line that Mary said, if we just say if any supporting documents are unavailable by the submission deadline, they should be listed with reasons for delay on the application form. Should the CPC decide to accept such reasoning, the supplemental paperwork must be in by
I
December.
don't even think you need to say that much. I would just say that the determination on completeness is up to the the sole discretion of the committee, and we decide, and
No, that goes down
really
to
no
what,
recourse.
that goes back to what John, go ahead, John.
Well, I think that's mostly already here in a couple of different places, so you might want to add a word or two to make it a little more concrete, but,
To emphasize it?
at the sole discretion, just those, I mean, in section 3, application review procedure, it says the Harwich Community Preservation Committee will review all applications for completeness and fulfilling the submission requirements outlined therein. Submissions deemed to be incomplete will not be considered. And maybe you can add just a sentence to that at the most. You know, this determination is at the sole discretion of the
Committee's decision is final.
right. And it says something similar up,
The question will
It
be
does.
whether we have consensus
Exactly.
about what.
It's always gonna be.
Well,
Well, that's gonna be the debate,
Right.
exactly.
Exactly.
and we'll vote to find out, right?
Right, exactly.
But that's fair. I
See
mean,
how
that's what-
mean-spirited everybody on this board is.
Oh, no, that's not nice.
It's not mean at all.
It's not mean, it's just there's, as Mary said, there's a difference between people who are really trying to
Get
do
it?
their best to get this in on time and are having difficulties beyond their control, and people that are like, yeah, really, we don't need it till December. And that's where we can,
Anything else on that particular issue?
No, I think that's good. So we'll add, that people should add the reason for delay for any paperwork that's not included, and then we'll add that sentence at the end of the paragraph under section 3, that this determination of completeness is at the sole discretion of the CPC and will be final.
And what it, at the sole discretion of the CPC, and,
Will be final.
thank you.
One thing we did change was we changed selectmen to select board. Now, that might be a little bit,
Premature.
yeah, only because it has to be approved at the state, correct? But,
But that has to come, that's 90 days from, so you have 30 days to submit after town meeting, and then the AG has 90
so my
days to make a
question is
determination.
it safe for us to change this
I
select
think it's
board?
safe to change it,
Yeah.
because,
It's the intent, right?
yeah.
Okay, so we'll just leave that.
Real quick, on submission requirements, section 1. I was caught off guard, Monday 2022, postmarks and courier receipts are not acceptable.
That's just something we had from before,
I never
always
saw
done
that
it.
before.
yeah.
I don't remember that at all, and
We didn't add that, that was something that was
that was
there.
something that was,
Yeah,
But that's how we've operated always, because you've always made sure they had to be in the administration office in hand physically. It was not, you didn't take things the next week if it was postmarked,
no,
Right.
no.
so.
But there were documents at times in the box downstairs.
that had to be emptied at 4 o'clock on that day.
Right.
And just on that same section, where it says at the bottom, any questions, about the application procedures, that should be no later than September 26th, not October, because that actually would be after the due date. And that's, I think, 1 or 2 weeks before. That's just so that people aren't asking questions like the day before. So literally the week before the submission, they would have to, is the deadline for submitting questions. And I think in the earlier application materials, it was almost like you could contact any member of the committee and,
It's not
That's not good.
We thought it would be good to, it should be centralized and, yeah. So
I'd
that's
recommend that we do, what's our meeting date in September? What's our last meeting date beforehand, so that any questions need to come to a,
Okay, what's the second Thursday in September?
The second
Sure.
Thursday in,
September 8th.
see.
September 8th.
so when are you, so your agenda, if it's September 8th, your agenda is coming in, is getting created the week before. So you're talking September
First.
It's
1st.
really early.
So that seems really harsh. That's like a month before the submission date, for questions.
Deadlines,
But I guess-
deadlines, you
I
gotta
guess
give them
my-
deadlines.
Yeah.
They have all the
My way of looking at it is that,
dates aren't anywhere.
But if
Our
we're-
future dates aren't anywhere.
But if they're asking a question, we only operate through meetings, so
True.
that's my reason for saying, by the September meeting. Because otherwise it is individual.
But to get around that, then it has to be a week before that. You can just have a general item, questions from applicants.
Right.
And then you don't have to worry about what each applicant, we don't have to list them individually on the agenda.
Right.
Right, and if
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that Dave could have an agenda item, application questions, and we
Right.
could address any
Right.
questions that came in
Right.
at the September meeting.
right,
Is that,
Yeah, that's,
Well, but you're saying that therefore you would have had to receive all the questions by the date of the meeting, which is September 8th, which seems like you could certainly get questions after September 8th, and
Yeah.
that just seems like that's not reasonable to not let people ask you a question a month before the submission. Usually 2 weeks maybe, but I don't know.
well, we're not saying they can't ask questions.
Well,
No, I mean,
But-
no, it's the time frame.
I understand that it feels like a long time. I'm just looking at it as that we're a board, so a question.
Go ahead, Robin, I'm
I'm
sorry.
But I
Through
suspect
meetings.
a lot of those questions are procedural
Yeah.
questions.
Should be, yeah.
Which Jan or you can answer that don't require a board. So I think that's gonna be most of the questions anyways, and if someone does have a complex question, then I'm sorry, you're gonna have to figure that out
Right,
on your application, because we can't advise you as an individual.
right.
And some eligibility questions we won't know because we won't have had a legal,
Opinion
That's
on
true.
it anyway.
opinion on it,
Right.
so
which we can pass on.
do you wanna put a date? Do you wanna make it an earlier date or leave the date as September 26th? A week
I
before?
guess leave the date at
I
that
think
point.
26 is
Yeah.
fine.
Okay.
Just leave the date at that point. We're not worried about a meeting.
Is that the
And then-
consensus of the board?
Yeah.
So you're saying September 26th?
September
Yeah.
26th, yeah.
It's just a placeholder, really. Isn't that what the selectmen always say?
That's what we're trying to
Yes.
get away from.
I know.
So we've also clarified that, because it was the wording was a little bit combined, that, if a project requires a sign-off from a town board or committee, that should be provided at the time of application unless it can't be scheduled, and then it's noted on the application and so forth. But then there was another part about if a proposal is sponsored by a town committee and they're submitting multiple requests, then those should be, the priority of those requests should be indicated by committee name 1, committee name 2 on the application. So the committee would have, like if there's real estate and open space.
So when rec comes in with 5 applications
Yeah.
next year, David,
Right.
So,
then rec gives us their priorities.
so that's been clarified.
But
Then-
usually that does take, at least from the rec point of view, that does take place. They do prioritize.
Yeah.
Right,
We don't push others to prioritize.
but they would be.
Under
bound
that,
to do
yes.
And then, the other thing we clarified is that, the CPC is not obligated to make a positive motion or to recommend or to do anything. I mean, you don't, right, have to act. Those are the big ticket
Yeah, those are
items.
the big things, and the other thing was we changed, I had Carol sort of knock down the box for the commissions, boards, committees, stuff, that took up too much room. Typically, we don't have that many sign off on anything, and then as Bob pointed out, it's not like obligatory.
Right.
So we didn't change that much in the actual application.
One other thing I would note is.
Carol, can I hold you up for a
Sure,
moment? Under project section criteria, number 2, the paragraph starts with the Harwich Community Preservation Committee.
Yeah.
Thereafter refer, that's a mumble jumble to me. It's just,
Yeah, that is-
CPC
that is kind of-
funding as set forth in,
That was probably taken from something else, 'cause we've
Yeah.
had that
as set
for
forth,
years.
shouldn't it read as set forth within the act?
So what they're pointing out is the local plans, the local planning that we've done, like the 2016 open space and recreation plan, the 2017 open space and recreation plan, the 2016 affordable housing plan, or the housing production plan, I guess it was called. The local comprehensive plan is what was done back in 2011, I think so. Those are all of locally adopted planning documents
Right.
that the town has voted on.
He's just questioning the first paragraph as being a little convoluted for
Or
him.
wordy, we could try.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I understand,
We
as
already-
defined by Mass General Law, Section 44B, I get that part of it.
We already have defined the CPC, so we could just take that all out. It should
Yeah,
just
yeah.
say the
That
CPC.
entire-
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We already
exactly.
discussed it, then
Yeah.
take it out. No one's gonna read this stuff anyway, you know.
that's true.
You do.
I do, but no
I
one else
do.
does. The people who are making the applications.
Okay, fair enough.
if
That's the
85%
consensus of
them
the
have
board.
submitted applications before, they're not gonna read the application. The stuff leading up to it. Unless we put like neon everywhere. Like, this is a change, read this. Like, this affects you.
Is the lunar eclipse,
This means you.
it's all about the lunar eclipse this
So
week, I
now the
decided.
sentence just reads, the CPC requires that all proposed projects comply with eligibility requirements for Community Preservation Act funding as set forth in the act, as defined by the General Laws of Massachusetts, 44B, as may be amended. Still
Perfect.
wordy,
Still
but,
wordy.
yeah, but a little less wordy maybe.
Perfect.
I
And
like
then-
that.
And then, the other thing, under reporting, which is section 4 of the application, CPC now requires biannual written update of all progress on all projects. Reports will be presented at the September and March regularly scheduled meetings. Just wanna make sure that's, is that still,
That's what we like.
okay,
Of course, this year we had it in April, but that's because we kind of went longer with
okay,
other stuff.
just
but-
to have those named, okay.
Yeah.
Let's do that. All right,
I didn't realize how condensed you made that. Wow. Okay.
Wait till you see it without the red lines.
Yeah.
You're gonna be amazed at Carol's work.
It's on one page, oh, well. Okay. Is there anything anybody else from the board has?
No, it's just if anybody takes the time to go through it again and sees any typos or anything, just, let Carol know.
I have a general question.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
Do we want an appeal process if on October 1st we say this application is junk, we're not accepting it? Do we want? No?
No.
Just
I see John shaking over there like, no.
No, it's a good,
fine with
It's a
me,
good
I just
question.
wanted to ask.
it's a good question, so I'm gonna go around the board with that one. John?
I think we already have an appeals process. It's called next year.
That's to the point. Are you all set, John?
Yes, thank you.
Robert?
It's a good point, Elizabeth, because I hate to penalize people if it's a legitimate mistake or something. I always hate to punish people because of that. And so I kind of feel that we should think about something like that.
Mary?
So I guess my comment would be, when we're making that determination, it's going to be at a public meeting, it's going to have to be agended. The applicants should have the ability to come before us and speak then and make their piece when there's a motion being done.
Right.
I understand not wanting to penalize them, and
We could inform them ahead of time.
they're gonna know ahead of time because it's gonna be in the application,
Well,
but they're gonna know that this
Right.
is the date that we've got you scheduled for us to review the application, the 17 applications that have come in, and say whether we believe they're complete. And one would hope that if they have some skin in the game and are looking for funding, that they'll be available to be able to answer questions as to why something wasn't complete and make their pitch before we take our vote. That's just my thought on that.
To John's
Peace.
point, next year.
Yep.
Carol?
Yeah, I think we should just be judicious, you know, in making that kind of determination, and I just think if we have an appeal process, you know, where does that go? I mean, it seems fraught, so I would just go with being careful.
Kathy?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that the likelihood of us turning down an application completely at the beginning of the process is unlikely, given that we, you know, we usually give opportunity to get questions answered, we give opportunity for additional budget estimates to come, and we give opportunity for sign-offs in case they can't make meetings. I mean, we're very flexible in allowances for the completion. What we're trying to do is, you know, get the effort for completion beforehand. So I don't see it as being a problem. I wouldn't favor an appeals process because I think that we're going to work
Everybody
with
would be
most of our
appealing.
applicants. That's what I would think.
Yeah.
So, to not too fine a point, we're not as mean-spirited as I alleged. Anyway,
Oh, David.
anything else? Carol?
So just clarity on the process here. So we can clean up based on the comments today and send track changes and a cleaned up, you know, accept the changes, and then, I mean, if there are formatting issues, John, if you can help with those, I mean,
Just let me know.
I tried to, like, remove some of the formatting, and I just couldn't. It just wouldn't go away.
Word is
So,
painful,
Mhm.
but,
He's a magician.
Okay, so we'll go from there. So I don't know when it is we want to have this, like, final and ready to go for the public.
As soon as possible.
As soon as, yeah.
Okay,
Last
so
year we were late, it was August. So, I mean, if we can get this out in
It's
July.
May, we're ahead of the game.
If we can get this out in July, like after the public meeting, that would be fantastic.
we should be able to do better.
Yeah.
Even if-
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm just saying, we're ahead.
Based
of
on
the game.
everybody's work schedule.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
if you want me to do formatting stuff, if there are things that need to be addressed in the formatting, when do you think you would be? Well, I don't think I'm gonna start with what's here, because it sounds like you're gonna make more changes, and I would wait until all the content changes have been made, or at least everything that you
Yeah,
know.
no, I think Carol just has a few
Yeah,
changes, there really
couple
weren't that
cleanups, and
many
we
that
can
we
get that
talked
to you in a
about.
week or so, yeah.
Okay, well, I will address that within a few weeks after that, I guess, but well before July.
Yeah, and then you can send it back to us, we can
Yeah,
review
you
it.
can look at it again.
Yeah,
Once all the track changes and stuff and formatting are out there, maybe other little things will surface, but hopefully not.
Do you think there's a possibility we could get it done by our next meeting, before our next meeting?
Possible.
you mean,
And
in
then,
case anybody comes to the public meeting that would
Right.
like an application? Oh, that'd be awesome.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
I didn't
You
want to
could
say
hand
it.
it to them when they're here?
I know.
I didn't want to
Elizabeth,
say
could you
it.
get us an updated chart as soon as possible for the affordable housing income limits? That would be great.
Okay. I could say we all have our marching orders in some way, shape, or form. All right, next, update the written policy CPC, Carol. We just did that. Follow up on the neighboring towns, Affordable Housing Trust.
Yeah,
Elizabeth, you have the floor.
I failed. I have to be honest, I was all gung ho when I got home from the meeting and talked to one person afterwards, in the following few days, who said, let me get back to you when we've finished creating our warrant. Because everybody, you know, I didn't hear from people, they were all dealing with town meeting. And so I finally said, okay, once town meetings are, you know, once you're done preparing for town meeting, I'll follow up, and then I totally forgot about it. I must admit, I have been having so many problems at the county level and everything, and I totally forgot to get back to them, but I don't think Brewster has had their town meeting yet, so I think that will affect the numbers. So I think I'm better off waiting for all towns to finish their town meeting votes so they'll know if any CPC funds were allocated this year. Because one of the questions was, how much do their funds have now? And some, in 2 towns that they were waiting on that.
Okay, thank you.
Just remembered
Kathy.
something. I was concerned at town meeting about the additional vote for the housing coordinator funds that was passed for CPC, because my CPA funding, because my understanding is that, you know, if the housing coordinator position that was tacked onto the operating budget was passed, that would be pulled for indefinite,
Postponement, yeah.
whatever they call it, indefinite consideration or whatever. And it wasn't, and it was voted on. So I didn't understand that.
So I don't know whether it was, I don't know why.
Well, Don asked for it.
I'm kind of less,
I know, I
couldn't
don't
figure
understand
out
though.
his reasoning either.
I'm kind of not worried about it because they're either gonna put somebody in the position, and I'm guessing they're not gonna use, that money's not gonna be released downstairs, right?
I just
They
think,
hadn't even released last year's funding,
I just think it caused confusion for the town voters too.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah,
do, and I
probably
wish
did.
it had been cleaner.
That was the request of both the chair of the Board of Selectmen and the town administrator. I raised my concerns. Unfortunately, I wasn't on the floor.
Yeah, I almost got up and spoke to it. I really didn't like the way it went down there like that.
Mhm.
But it kinda happened quick too.
It did,
Yeah.
it did. But also, we hadn't rescinded our vote, so we did have a positive vote on it, so we also couldn't stand up and say that, you know,
No, but I wish that the people at the top of the front of the podium there had done what they had said they were gonna do. Bob, did you feel the same way? or-
Exactly. I was a little baffled on that. Because it kind of seems like they have permission to spend another 50,000 if they want to get another part-timer.
Yeah, it was
It just-
confusing. It was confusing. John, did you?
Yeah, I thought that was an inconsistency. Didn't Don get up and, Don
Yeah,
Howell
he
get up
did.
and
He
speak
spoke.
on it?
Yeah.
For it.
Yeah, and he said he still wanted the money, but he didn't say for what. I mean,
Well,
I
he can't-
voted,
He
I
can't
voted
use it
no,
for
but
something else.
No,
No.
they have to use it
and that's
towards,
kind of why I wasn't fully worried about it, you know?
and they did
to be
take the
honest.
picture, well, at least what I saw on TV, they did in the very beginning, when they were discussing it, say that there was the money was dedicated through the budget. That was clear, because that got questioned. So, I don't know the answer.
The salary
But-
was dedicated, did they say?
Well, yeah, salary and wages, yeah.
so should we,
That inquiry will take place. I will get the answer to that.
should we move to rescind that $50,000?
I don't know if we can move to rescind the town meeting vote.
We could only rescind if the money wasn't spent in 3 years.
Right,
Yes.
if it was spent improperly, we can pull it back. But cooler heads will prevail, hopefully. Kathy?
I just have another question administratively speaking. Did you receive an invoice for the
Yes,
appraisal for
and it
the-
can't be July 30th, I believe,
Why?
because that's the start of the new fiscal cycle.
Yeah, but it's coming out of
July-
admin
no,
funds that we have now.
Doesn't matter. The finance director would not confirm, would not sign off. She sent an email, she copied me on it, to the chair,
But
explaining what her reason was.
okay,
She said unequivocally, the money can't be released until that date.
I don't understand that either.
because, I don't understand why, I mean, because it's
I'm not
tied,
the-
no, I know, I'm just asking you if it's because it's tied to a project that is funded to start July 1, or because it's they're confused that it was tied up with our motions for the warrant articles, because it has nothing to do with the warrant article. It was coming out of admin funds.
In either case, it's not gonna happen until,
Okay, I just
2:30.
wanted to know.
Yeah, I don't know why.
I can't answer the question.
know.
So, another thing that I need to have a discussion with the chairman first. Okay, is there anything else? Does anybody from the board want anything on next agenda? And a meeting date is,
The same.
9.
And it's the public meeting.
that's the public meeting
I think we should talk about.
It's a public hearing, right?
here.
I think
Sorry.
we should talk about, recognition of CPA-supported funding.
Good point.
Recognition of,
CPA-supported funding.
So the project, meaning that projects have signs and
Yeah.
posts that they are.
Yeah.
I do not disagree with you at all.
Okay,
I think that helps support the perception.
Didn't we review that a couple years ago? And state that they had to have some kind of
Yeah. We're not-
mention somewhere?
We don't have any teeth in it.
Okay.
Is it in the requirement?
We have something in there, but I'm proposing that we do something else.
that's a good point. Another thing, on town meeting floor, one of the taxpayers was concerned about the land bank and how much time was left to pay the land bank off. And we all know that's in '24. So there's something I would like the board to consider. Right now, we get 3% of the levy to do what we need to do for CPC. There's been talk in the past, and I don't know where this lies now in today's market, that the percentage may change. So, I would like you all to evaluate where the CPC is, where it's going, and what your thoughts are of being proactive to the taxpayers of the town, letting them know what the CPC is in its entirety and what it does for this town. Now, that's a pretty broad brush. Robert?
Are you referring to the fact that the taxpayers or at town meeting can change that percentage? You're not talking about a state thing or anything?
No, this is the taxpayers on town meeting floor. Once the land, well, Mary, she, go
So
ahead.
I believe, and I'm not 100% sure on it, but if memory serves, the 3% is how we maximize the state reimbursement.
Right.
Yes.
So the 3% does allow us to get more funding in. I do also want to just point out that if Kathy's got all those wonderful numbers out there that show how much CPA funding has been used and what the benefits are, that is a perfect way to help explain to the town what the CPC funding actually does and what it takes out of the general operating budget, right? It's money that you're used to paying now because it's added to your tax bill, and it's being used regularly for significant projects. So I think if you start looking at the totals of what you've done over the CPA Act, it will help put a kind of a concrete example for the taxpayers. And to Kathy's point, signage and recognition goes a long way, because every time I go to Pleasant Road Beach, I see the sign that says, you know, CPC funding paid for the improvements on, you know, such and such. So that really is an important role, and maybe we need to emphasize that to our project managers and at our biannual updates, that the expectation is still that signage and that recognition is going to happen, because that's going to affect
Future
ta-
funding.
it's gonna affect future applications, right? It's, the taxpayers are gonna see, oh, hey, you know, these great improvements at Red River Beach happened because of CPC funds, so maybe I won't question the
So
expenditure
that
on
could be an
the
agenda
floor.
item.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, Mary. I'm looking for a way to paint a picture for the town to what the CPC has done in the past and what it does presently, and all the projects. Now, Kathy and I had a discussion about this. I went to the library, because the library was a big number. And quite frankly, all the times I've been driving around the library, I've been watching out from people trying to hit me in my vehicle, and I never paid attention. There's a corner placement of CPC recognition on the corner of, I never saw it before. And I had a question of whether or not that had followed through.
So
It
maybe-
did.
So maybe it's a good idea to get photos of those, and we can upload those onto our website so that they're going along with some of the other educational materials.
That's what this discussion's all about. For example,
It's not on
rec,
the agenda, though, I'm not sure we should be discussing this whole.
No, next time
I
around.
mean,
For the
yeah, it
next
doesn't
time.
have to be an agenda item. I mean, I didn't anticipate bringing this up, I'm just coming off the top of my head.
Okay.
I read the law. Anyway, rec consistently puts any kind of unit up that they possibly can to acknowledge that the money comes from CPC on every one of their projects. I don't necessarily know if that has been done in the past, but I would think in this case, because of, quite frankly, wastewater has become so dominant and is such an issue in this town. I don't want to see CPC be reduced, because CPC does for the town things that the town would not do in a capital budget for itself. So I'm looking for a different venue in order to get from A to B, moving forward. Maybe the Board of Selectmen will argue to the point where they reduce it a point and a half. I don't know. I'm speculating based on conversations of the past, within the past year. So, again, I'd rather be proactive in this particular subject than reactive to them. So, it's a good start for a conversation. Go ahead, Rob.
Is that going to be not just a topic to discuss, but a topic to present at our June meeting in the open thing? We have all your numbers that we can present at that meeting of what's been spent on each project?
I mean, we can produce anything, I mean, it depends on the depth of the conversation you wanna have,
And it depends on who's in the room.
yeah.
Well, don't forget, the room is also Channel 18.
Right.
Good correction, you're absolutely right.
I mean, of all the meetings in the year, that's a good meeting to present what we've been doing, since it is,
Carol?
And those are big numbers.
yeah.
In addition to the numbers, though, as I think you were getting at before, I think that identifying some high-profile projects that are really popular, in all the different categories, because that's what people, the numbers may not resonate to everyone, but,
Right.
oh, really, I didn't know that was funded
Just
by.
looks in the brochure.
Yeah, I
Well,
know.
I know, for example, pickleball's around 2,000. So, okay, we'll put that on the next agenda, please.
Yep,
All right.
and then we weren't really chatting today.
Oh, you're exactly right. I didn't see this until I come in the building. Bikeways Committee is having a meeting on Wednesday, May 18th at 10:30. It's a, oh, damn. It's I got it. The purpose of the meeting is to give recognition to the towns plural, CPCs, for granting funding for the monument. The chair of Chatham CPC is going to attend. Can anybody from this committee attend?
What is it?
It's,
The marker?
It's the marker, yeah.
The $700 we contributed to the marker?
Yes.
Well, Chatham can,
When is it?
it's May 18th at
That's
10:30.
Wednesday. Day after town election.
May 18th at 10:30?
Yep,
Where?
Oh.
At the marker, I think.
At the marker?
I'm
I don't know
guessing.
where the marker is.
it doesn't say.
Keep walking
I
on the
believe
path.
it's on the bike path.
I know it's on the bike path,
Oh,
Keep
on
walking.
the intersection of Chatham and Harwich, right?
Right.
Which is,
at the Old Colony Rail Trail Town Boundary Monument on Wednesday, May 18th.
I don't know where that is.
So it's gonna be near,
I think it's
It's gotta be
1:30.
off a depot somewhere.
Go Depot and head toward Chatham, and it's about halfway.
Oh, there you go.
I think it might be
Walk?
off 130,
Go
137.
to Depot
no,
and...
no.
3 miles!
So no, if you,
No, it's
so you
not.
figure the town
I'll have
line
to
is,
go to the
No,
gym that
it's
morning.
between Depot and Morton.
right,
Morton
exactly.
is in Chatham, Depot is in Harwich, it's about halfway between.
Okay.
But the
Thank you,
bike,
John.
And Red River actually goes under there in a culvert or something. You might notice a river, you might not.
You could go up a river. If you go up the
I'll
river
check
without a
my-
paddle,
I'll check my calendar.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. Okay, is there anything else that the board would like on the agenda for our next meeting?
No.
I'll entertain a motion.
motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It's adjourned. Thank you, folks.
There is something with the full moon this week. I'm